Gavin, the numbers and stats that you guys have both been sharing are scary, like you said. And at Future Females, we also have a foundation focused on GBV. And I remember my co-founder and I sitting down and deciding whether to launch it. And actually, Shandy, who runs it, is in the room here tonight over there. But we were like, can we actually make a difference? Because this problem is so big. So I think firstly, starting was the best thing that you did, because for us also, we were like, let's just start. But then the second thing is obviously tapping into your networks, those collaborations, that awareness that you could leverage through others as well, I think has really contributed to the massive impact you've been able to make. So I think maybe bringing it back to people sitting here who know they want to make a difference. Maybe it's not GBV, it's in their own interest. What would your advice be for starting?
I think everything starts with something very, very, very small.
Hello, 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 everybody. This show has been created to inspire you to take action,
celebrating and reframing what success looks like,
to be the best version of ourselves that we can be.
And we have incredible speakers for you tonight. Welcome back to another incredible episode of the Future Female Show, which, as you know, is all about celebrating and reframing success in all walks of life, all industries. I am one of your hosts, Lauren Dallas, and this is my amazing co-host, Susanna Kennedy.
Hello! Hi, everybody. We are so excited to have you here tonight. And I'm super excited to introduce you to our next guest. Now, our next guest grabbed my attention first, actually, on the runway. He is an outstanding designer and has done so much designing, not only in fashion, but also in furniture, in all kinds of different creative industries. He is superb. But what really caught my attention is the amount of work that he does behind the scenes, helping women and children. He is an ambassador for UNICEF. He works with Harvard University. He works with Fashion Week. And he has founded the White Light Project. Have I said that right?
Movement.
I knew I'd gotten one word wrong there. The White Light Movement. Gavin Rajah, welcome to the Future Female Show. How are you doing this evening?
Well, thank you for having me, and I feel so honored to actually be sharing this amazing space on Women's Day with all you incredible people. I was actually having a little bit of an insecure moment, thinking, God, how am I going to top the last person? But it's been amazing sitting here, because I was sitting down and thinking all the things you're talking about apply generically to so many things and to so many other men as well. And I think, we filled with this amazing, not so amazing, machismo kind of mentality and these alpha males that dominate. So it's so nice to be, I feel like I'm at work, because my entire business is 99% woman. So I feel like I'm the naughty kid amongst a whole lot of nurturing, wonderful feminine energy. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for wearing your bling too. We're loving it. Gavin, there's so many things I think we could dig into in this interview, but what I would really like to get out of this is understanding your career, but also why you launched the White Light Movement at the point that you did. I think so many women and men, they want to start businesses that help people and are naturally inclined to lean into the NPO space. But what I see from you, and I would love you to share a little of, is that you'd already built this brand and business, and it helped you launch your NPO perhaps with even greater impact. So maybe to start with, though, tell us a bit about your career and when and why you did launch the White Light Movement.
So I think many people think I just came into fashion because I never studied fashion. I used to be a terrible lawyer. And I'll explain to you why I was so bad. And in fact, a very interesting story. One of the first clients I ever had, who's a friend of mine, Michelle, is sitting here. And she used to come for her fittings at University Res. So if anybody knew a res back then called Driekoppen, which is now called Capano, that's where I was. So I used it as my first studio. But I used to have this, I thought I was going to be, LA law and amazing and whatever. And then I realized the first thing I did in legal aid clinic was work for the Greenpoint Domestic Workers Association. And I just realized, oh my God, there's so much of helplessness out there. And I really wondered whether law was something you could access, or it was something that if you had enough money, you won it, or you strung it out. And it seems to be the same thing at the moment. There's this inaccessibility about justice, and also it was at a time before, during apartheid. So there were all these kind of weird things going on. And I thought, a friend of mine, it was a little bit of an Oprah moment, because, I could easily have been a waiter at the Spur, which I didn't want to do. I could have sold some bodily fluids, which was very popular at that time. Didn't quite find myself doing that. And so I tried a little stint as a Baxter, as an usher in the Baxter Theatre, and I was horribly rude to everybody. Only because they were so late and tardy in coming to it, whatever. But anyway, long story short, had an Oprah moment with a friend of mine who said to me, you got to do what makes you really happy. And at that time, I was selling overruns of clothing from my dad's factory. And so I had this kind of little pyramid scheme, Tupperware thing going on, because I was at Res. I'd give merchandise to people staying in Joburg and Port Elizabeth. So I was actually quite a wealthy student. And when I realized in first year doing articles, I was literally a pauper. I was earning such bad work, and they was being treated horribly. So anyway, long story short, I decided, well, that's it. I'm going to do fashion because it makes me happy and I'm going to be creative. And then I went into this lawless profession where, you came from a legal background. There were all these laws, and here people could say anything. And a couple of years later, I found myself in understanding this, that there's no ethics, there's no, people say whatever they want to, they comment whatever they want to. There's no one defending you, or there's, anyway, I'm digressing. But anyway, long story short, I ended up becoming a fashion designer. And I think one of the things I realized was that, well, here's my friends who think it's just like a, endless top-up of champagne at all these events and meeting all these plastic people. And it was really boring because, and it's really not a big thing, but I think fashion people can be quite daft. Sorry to say it, but it's the truth. I'm also known for really pissing people off. But I suppose
a lot of people are nodding, which is concerning.
You've got to be brutally honest, otherwise there's no real point in being authentic. And I think one of the things I did was always had the sense of justice. And the first thing when I came into fashion was understanding that the people that worked for me, the people that I encountered, were all going through their own kind of trauma, their personal journeys, and all of those things weren't necessarily all good things. And I was very lucky that I grew up in a period when, just as Madiba came out of prison, and he was launching the Nelson Mandela's Children's Foundation, and I was just starting. I don't even know how he got to me, but he took me to London to launch this thing at the Royal Chelsea Hospital. And so it instilled in me that, wow, here's this person, spent all this time in jail, is literally 2 years out, and he's doing these amazing things. So I thought, well, great, I'll get on board. And so for the longest time, I helped him do all these things, and had many a horrible moment where I had to even work with Naomi Campbell, just trying to help him raise money, but at the same time raise her profile. So I always thought at some point I wanted to do something good. And then I got involved with traveling and literally going across the border in Zimbabwe and realizing people were banging on the car because they didn't want money. They wanted to ask if I had pens and pencils and papers and whatever. And I had a client, which is Sun International, and I was touring this place with a British artist friend of mine, and we went to Sun City, and then I found out quite a weird thing. By kind of really being inquisitive, I found out there was a clinic at Sun City, and the most number of patients that were going there were HIV positive. So there was a lot of the workers. And then I was like, gosh, there's such a huge incidence of this, what's happening? And we thought, like, let's go into the town. So Rustenburg's the biggest town, and if you know Rustenburg, it's on the border of South Africa, literally, and Zimbabwe. So obviously you have all these truckers that come through, and wherever you have truckers and these kind of things, you have a high incidence of, sex workers. And so you were all these amazing women who were trying to provide for their families, but were literally destitute and also sick, and so were their kids. And I just kind of made a thing at that stage, like, listen, I have to do it. I didn't know what I was going to do, honestly, because people think I started with a really big idea, but I really started with something very small. And then coincidentally, I bumped into the Archbishop of the Diocese of Rustenburg, and he was like, hey, I'll give you the land if you want, take it. But there's no electricity and there's no water. And I was like, well, what do I have to do to take this land? He says, well, you have to go and speak to the Archbishop in Cape Town, Desmond Tutu. So I did. And he says, I'll give it to you. You can have the land, but I can't help you because the church has various, limited funds. And so I started this event called Positive and wrote a letter to Seal saying, hey, come and do a 45-minute set here. We're doing this. Seal came. The next year, Kelly Rowland came. The next year, John Legend came. So it was just an idea, but I stuck to it and I did it. And then later on, I became a UNICEF ambassador, and I was doing all these crazy things. People ask you every day, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and, support it. And then I just thought, well, I'd had so much of experience in terms of doing these things that I really knew what was needed out there. But the only way I could do it was be in control of that process, because every organization, person has their own way of moving things forward. So then I started this thing called the White Light Movement, because I believe there was so much of darkness, but even in darkness, there's beauty to be found, or there's, compassion or whatever. And so that's kind of where it started, really.
I love it so much. I love the way you say, and then randomly this happened, and randomly this happened. It's like the universe is literally conspiring to help you.
It does.
It's like sending you the right introductions, the right people,
absolutely,
the right opportunities, and you've taken them all. And I think that in itself is a huge lesson, because I think so many people are presented with opportunities. They are presented with these crossroads, these choices, and often they're too scared to take that leap, to just dive in and get dirty and fail miserably, possibly, but they could also succeed. And I love that quote. I'm sure you know, Gavin. It's like, oh, but what if I fail? And it's like, oh, darling, but what if you fly? And you have been flying. And I love
don't get me wrong, I've had a few crash fails and horrible kind of
I don't
starts,
doubt it for a second. But you've flown. You've made a massive, massive difference. One of the questions I really have for you, because you are so comfortable in this beautiful environment filled with women, why specifically gender-based violence? Why is that something that has been a focus for you?
So one of the very first things, I think you always, I'm not sure how many other people are involved in this kind, in kind of NPO work, NPC work, or NGO work and stuff like that, but you're kind of drawn to something that you resonate with. And originally I'd started my focus on really looking at children who were HIV positive because of the whole thing around Rustenburg. Then came the World Cup, and so I was asked to be an ambassador for South Africa for the World Cup. Terrible ambassador, okay, but I'd always known for doing these very subversive things because a year before that we hosted the World Cup cricket, right? And so I was asked to do the opening ceremony and do it as a show. And so had this big fashion show, and each model would bring out the next team or whatever. And I deliberately put a transgender model with the Zimbabwean team.
Yes, you.
And when they found out, they were livid. But anyway, I thought, well, deal with it. And so came the South African government and a whole lot of bodies were saying, listen, would you be a champion for this? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd help you. But then a very terrible thing came to my knowledge, and that is wherever there's a World Cup in the world, there's the highest incidence of child abuse, child trafficking, and pedophilia. Because men are outside their countries, and so they can do whatever they think without any retribution. So there I was in the middle of Somerset West in this amazing Stephen Anthony house, designed house. And there was a pedophile outside that had been inside that had been taking bookings for a year in advance for girls. And I mean, he was Belgian. He was not really South African, but he had based himself there. And so I was thinking, shit, this is really bad. And I was like kind of getting more stories, and more people were coming to me, and people were saying this is happening. And there was a Granddaddy Hotel in Cape Town in Long Street that was being used to shoot porn, and, you know, with kids on the street and stuff like that. I mean, it's no longer, but I'm just saying that all these things were coming. And I was like, well, somebody has to do this. And the more I delved into this thing, I realized, my gosh, we actually have a really bad problem here, and none of us are talking about it. No corporates are sponsoring anything about it. Nobody is, because it's just not a feel-good thing. The irony also is that I was dealing with a lot of children and a lot of child sex abuse cases. So the first thing I did was look at partnership with government and saying we need to develop a clinic, and a clinic which is on the base of a hospital ground, which is not designed like a clinic. So it's not intimidating, because my legal background was saying we need to reduce the number of incidences, and how do you do that is by securing convictions, and how do you secure the convictions is by gathering evidence, and what evidence you have to do. It's you've just had this violating, terrible incident happen to someone, and then here comes a medical process that kicks in, and it's swabbing and collecting specimens and stuff like that. So for kids, I wanted to be an experience that was nurturing, so, and there was a forensic sister on board, there was a doctor that could be on call, and whichever hospital it was based on was could have an emergency or trauma ward, because quite often there's a lot of internal injuries. And the other thing was, because of stigmatism, is that these kids or women or young men would be collected in unmarked vehicles, in people not wearing a uniform, because obviously quite often the abuser was in there, the community would talk, and so it was all these issues. So these, for all intents and purposes, while I was very instrumental, they're now owned technically by government, which is a great thing. Whether government does enough to maintain these clinics and do other things, that's another story, but they're called Tutuzela clinics. And so, I was able to fund and do things.
Can we have a whole year for that, guys? Gavin, just a sobering, horrible fact for all of you. There's been 180,000 gender-based violence cases this year alone. 5 rapes happen per hour in South Africa. 120 rapes a day. 3,600 rapes a month. 10,800 rapes since January to March, just in those 3 months. Only 1 in 9 rapes gets reported. 6% of sex offense conviction rate. 6% conviction rate. 6%. And one of the reasons that I want to bring that up is, first of all, just honoring you for creating even some space for women and children to be able to go where they're safe I know so many stories, awful stories, of women wanting to report an incident, going to a police station and being treated terribly and not even being able to report the cases. And I know that so many women, I mean, I had this conversation the other day. One of my biggest things was telling the truth of what had happened to me. And the reason why I speak so publicly about it is because I know how hard it is. I know how difficult it is. And I know how difficult it is for families because they feel helpless. But we have to speak.
I think that's amazing. I mean, I think the thing is, the people. So I was finding these young kids coming in, and there are 2 clinics I do in Cape Town who are kind of satellite clinics because our wonderful government decided to do renovations to GF Euster Hospital. It's been closed for years, and this amazing clinic that we'd built there is now kind of not accessible as it used to be. But the numbers are quite scary, I think, and we don't quite realize it because we're so far removed from these kind of things. But one of the things I specifically looked at was, and how it came to kind of be more gender-based violence, was around the fact that these kids have mothers, and these mothers are sometimes incumbent on the abusers themselves. So it was their boyfriends or the husbands or an uncle or somebody in the environment. And, there's this thing like the abuser's often known to the people.
60% actually is the rate.
So they were missing, clinic dates, court appointments. And so the issue around this was like, why? And why was because they were not financially independent. And there's this whole thing about us needing to make all women, financially inclusive in the economy, because for the longest time, forever, we're not included. Women are not included. So I thought, well, what can I do? I can only teach them how to sew, embroider, do basic kind of things. But if I taught one, they'd teach someone else, and they'd maybe these kind of entrepreneurial skills, foster that, and then at the same time also teaching about financial literacy, because this is a big thing. Why many people don't have wealth or accumulate wealth or know how to manage it is because the basic things of financial literacy they don't know. And how can I help them? So if they have to go to an appointment for an interview for a job, can I, whatever my sample rail is, help them with those kind of things or whatever. But that's really what the white light movement is all about. And woohoo!
Hell yes to that. I mean, Gavin, the numbers and stats that you guys have both been sharing are scary, like you said. And at Future Females, we also have a foundation focused on GBV. And I remember my co-founder and I sitting down and deciding whether to launch it. And actually, Shandy, who runs it, is in the room here tonight over there. So yay.
And we are going to bring her up after Gavin for just 5 minutes quickly.
Yes. But we were like, can we actually make a difference? Because this problem is so big. So I think firstly, starting was the best thing that you did, because for us also, we were like, let's just start. But then the second thing is obviously tapping into your networks, those collaborations, that awareness that you could leverage through others as well, I think has really contributed to the massive impact you've been able to make. So I think maybe bringing it back to people sitting here who know they want to make a difference. Maybe it's not GBV, it's in their own interest. What would your advice be for starting?
I think everything starts with something very, very, very small. And so, you also asked me about what kind of triggered this. And I'm just thinking and sitting here and I was realizing, without mentioning anybody, but I had friends whose mothers were victims of gender-based violence, like really bad, and it was a recurring kind of thing. And I saw my friends, how they were so affected by this. It was really, there was a huge toll. But I always think about them, and now those friends of mine help me with my foundation, and they want to be part of it. But I think you see things around you, and this is the biggest thing. We're quite apathetic as people. We don't want to get involved. It's not our problem. Yes, it is your problem. You know, who are we raising if we're not raising accountable and responsible human beings? You know, if I can't recognize the humanity in you and you and you, then I'm going to be so gratuitous in my violence. Look at the level of violence. People are not used to, are content with just giving you a slap now. There's this kind of really brutal force that they want to inflict on people. And you're asking yourself, why is this happening? How come this is actually happening? And this is because we don't value the people around us. We look at life and we think it's nothing. So for me, though, I think start with something small. Start with something that you're passionate about, whatever it is. You don't have to do anything big. I mean, I really just was doing my thing. I mean, I wasn't thinking that I was going to host big events and speak to... I mean, I was like any Joseph, just sending an email saying, hey, you know, come and do this thing. And the next day I got an email saying, yes, I'll do it. But one thing I have used is that I always say I could get a good table at a restaurant using my name. Sometimes it works. But I'd rather use the name or the visibility of the brand to foster some form of transformation. And I think that's really important. It's okay. You can be a business out there. You can do whatever you want. You can, nothing wrong with capitalism, but I think we need to foster some form of responsibility. There has to be we have to be responsible for each other. We can't just live in a vacuum.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
Love that. And I think that, you know, part of what you're saying is giving by being responsible and taking that responsibility. One of the biggest things, and that's what I was tapping into earlier on, is that victims feel like it's their fault, right? They feel like it's their fault, so they take responsibility for the entire situation, and they don't want to share that responsibility with anyone else because they feel the weight of it. But as we share the weight of it, both as victims and as family members and friends and co-workers and mothers and brothers and sisters, we then carry it all together. And you know that saying, you know, many hands make light work. It's the only way we're going to change things. So, Gavin, you're amazing.
Oh, no, you're all amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here today.
So before I go, I just want to say something, and I really want to echo what Oyama said. It is about the company you keep. It is about that, you know, people say network. I don't like saying network. I say a community that you build and you foster around you. Because if you foster that community to be nurturing, it'll protect you. It'll end up actually also developing a different ethic and instilling a different ethic in this younger generation that's coming forward, which I hope, and I please God, we have more people, we're raising more accountable human beings to come into this world. And the last thing, some people, I mean, I spoke to somebody here, but if you can share the details, because one of the things is we've got involved in so many things like feeding programs, especially over COVID, and we're still continuing to do that. My focus is actually still always kids, but we're happy to try and assist wherever possible. So you can always send us an email or send me an email, and if we can help, we can help, you know, because I believe it's good to just kind of work together, and, you know, maybe we reach out to you in the next instance for something else. But yeah, these things are very, very important. And I was just saying earlier on to Michelle and to Annette, I don't know why men aren't doing this as well.
Thank you so much, Gavin. And guys, you can trust Gavin when he says that. It's not just lip service. I have gone and sat on Gavin's couch and had lengthy conversations about like what we want to do to change the world. So he's not just saying it to be cool. He actually does this stuff. So yeah, big congratulations, like just celebrations.
Thank you,
to
Gavin. And thank you to all of you as well and everyone tuned in online.
Thank you so much, everyone at home, for watching, and join us again soon on the Future Females Show.